Hello, I am a new user here and I have recently discovered something important about my past. Before I get into the main part of my story, I want to give you some background information. My wife, who I sometimes refer to as the wayward wife, and I have been together for 24 years. We have been married for 7 of those years, and I am currently 57 years old, while she is 53. We own a small farm, and it's completely paid off. Our children are all grown up and have moved out. Our relationship has never been perfect, and we have had to make some tough decisions along the way. One of those decisions was not getting married earlier in our relationship. I realized that if we have tied the knots too soon, my kids might not have accepted her as their mother. As a result, for the first 17 years of our relationship, we lived in separate houses. We faced the usual challenges that couples do, especially when it comes to raising our children. However, we didn't have any major argument, and for me, it was generally a good experience. In the spring of 2018, things took a turn. I injured my right shoulder while hurrying to complete some much needed fencing work for our livestock. My shoulder was in terrible shape and I was still working part-time job at the time. Eventually, I couldn't continue working and my wife, who had a job she could do from home, suggested I stay home as well. Everything seemed fine to me, but little did I know that my wife had a habit of telling lies. Then, in February 2019, I contracted the corona. At that time, there weren't any tests available for it. The virus ended up causing serious heart problems for me. Just as we discovered these heart issues, the hospitals went into lockdown due to the pandemic, and I couldn't get medical attention for about 5 months. By the end of this ordeal, I was left with a permanent heart condition that required large doses of medication to manage. The medication I had to take for my heart condition had a side effect. It took away my ability to be intimate, which led to a deep depression. Life started to feel very grim, and I withdrew from everything around me. As time went on, the medication began to control my heart issues, and I started to improve in various aspects of my life. Around June 2021, I began to notice some unusual behavior from my wife, who I sometimes refer to as the wayward wife. My depression had lessened a bit by then, although I still feel quite down. Just to be honest, we hadn't been intimate for 2 years because the medication has essentially put a stop to it. My wife began coming up with all sorts of excuses to leave the house frequently. She used to go to the store once or twice a week, but now it was 4 or 5 times a week. She probably thought she was being discreet, but I was somewhat aware of my surroundings, even though I didn't really care much at the time. I attempted to check her computer when she left, hoping to find some clues, but she was managing it quite well, and I didn't want to confront her about the password issue back then. This went on for several months, and it became increasingly obvious that my wife was involved in an affair. She was frequently on the phone, claiming to be talking to her kids and such. Then, around mid August, I had a checkup with my doctor. He said things were improving and changed my medication. Almost immediately, I started feeling better. I had more energy, slept better, and things began working again. Fast forward to the night before our anniversary and what would later become a significant day in my life. Not in a good way. Yes, you guessed it. I found out about her affair on our anniversary, November 24th, 2021. We hadn't been physically close for years. Not because I didn't want to, believe me, but she rolled over and things happened. I probably shouldn't have given in, but it's hard to resist sometimes. The next morning, we went about our usual chores. She mentioned that she had to rush to the store at 7:30 a.m. of all times. But on this particular day, our anniversary, she seemed careless. She hurried off and didn't ensure that the computer was securely locked, which would later become significant. I quickly hopped onto the computer, opened the browser history, and noticed some unusual activities. I clicked on them and discovered an ongoing private Facebook conversation with a guy that had been happening for about 4 or 5 months. I read through some of the explicit details they had shared, thinking that I might need this as evidence for a potential divorce court case. I couldn't hold back my shock and anger, so I texted her immediately, telling her not to return home, and sent several of the screen captures from the laptop to her. To my utter disbelief, she actually came home and we had a massive explosive argument that ended with her leaving. I was completely devastated. In just a matter of minutes, everything we had built for over 24 years seemed to vanish. What made it even more bewildering was the discovery that she had been taking suggestive photos for months before the affair. When I questioned her about these pictures, she offered a rather absurd excuse, claiming she wanted to see what she looked like. I couldn't help but sarcastically respond, "You wanted to see what your private parts look like?" It seemed like she was unable or unwilling to tell the truth, no matter how many chances I gave her to do so. As I continued to investigate, I discovered that before she got involved, she had been using a website called Adult Friend Finders, which, to my surprise, turned out to be quite a degenerate place. When I confronted her about this, she quickly deflected by saying that she was lonely and seeking affection, even though it's clear that affection is not what is typically on offer on such a site. Quite the opposite. To this day, she keeps trying to shift the blame for the affair onto me, citing circumstances that were entirely beyond my control. She knows deep down that this isn't true, but her delusions prevent her from accepting it. We lived separately for about 10 days, and eventually we had a conversation. She expressed a desire to come back home. Initially, I refused, but she went to my family to plead her case. Given that we had been together for 24 years, I decided to at least hear her out. I reluctantly agreed to give her another chance, partly influenced by my kids and the fact that our dogs were missing her. I was willing to try and see if she could come clean and make amends. Although, as it would turn out, this decision would later prove to be a significant mistake. 6 weeks into this situation, and last night, when she had her first individual counseling session, I have come to realize that she's a habitual liar, and I don't trust her at all anymore. Knowing her tendency to manipulate the truth, I heard a voice recorder secretly captured her first session. I'm aware this wasn't the best course of action, but I suspected she might present a biased version of events to the individual counseling. As expected, during the individual counseling session, she not only distorted the truth, but went even further. After listening to the lies she told on the individual counseling, I made up my mind that I needed to divorce her. I have to safeguard this recording because I don't want her to know that I heard every word spoken during the session. The recorder was so good that I could even hear what the individual counselor said. I was initially open to the idea of reconciliation, but now I find myself in a delicate situation, knowing the stark contrast between her real story and what she's saying in everyday life. It's also worth noting that she has a history of using marijuana, which she believes she's been doing without my knowledge. However, that hasn't gone unnoticed. This morning, she decided to confess about her marijuana use, claiming that the individual counseling had advised her to quit, even though they never discussed that topic. It seems that she had been too broken to save, and she has truly shattered my world. This is the most profound hurt I have ever experienced. While I acknowledge that my own issues played a part in our problem, I also understand that her decision to have an affair was entirely her own, and I can't bear the blame for that. She mentioned to the individual counselor that she couldn't cope with our current transparency rules, which I had implemented after recent events. She claimed she had no privacy, and given the circumstance, it's hard to trust her with any level of privacy at this point. I understand that this had been a lengthy and somewhat rambling story, but I needed to include as much background information as possible to help myself make sense of it all. It's heartbreaking to lose 24 years of work and commitment, but at this juncture, I am unsure about what else to do. I want to mention that the voice-activated recorder can be a useful tool when dealing with someone whose behavior has become unpredictable. However, it's essential to check the local wiretapping laws to ensure you are not doing anything that could lead to legal trouble. I deleted the recording once I had gathered the information I needed. I just wanted to know the extent of the lies told in one go. Unfortunately, there is no guarantee of a complete recovery at this point. Things are as good as they are likely to get for now. Interestingly, she spent a lot of time last night during her individual counseling session complaining about the medical bills I had accumulated due to my heart issues. Yet this morning, she attempted to show concern about me going back to work, which I had no choice but to do because I can't trust her any longer. The constant stream of lies make me feel physically ill. I can't stand people who act one way to your face and another behind your back. And in her case, it's a significant problem. Whenever she entered a room I'm in, it makes me nauseous. I just can't be around her right now, especially after the absurd session she had with her individual counselor last night. I hope the individual counselor isn't gullible enough to believe the tall tales she spun during that session. It doesn't make any sense to invest time and money in an individual counselor if you're going to be 90% dishonest. Why bother with it? To make matters worse, this morning she started with the Regretful Spouse Act. She began to blame me, saying I was a bad husband. It's incredible how she suddenly shifted the timeline, now claiming it's been 5 years of issues, even though just yesterday she acknowledged it'd been 2.5 years. It's like the story doubled overnight. I deleted the recording, but it made me realize even more just how deceptive she truly is. Apparently, her individual counselor suggested having a session with both of us. At first, I refused, but when she mentioned that the individual counselor advised her to quit using marijuana because it's an issue for me, I considered agreeing to the session. If I do, it might provide an opportunity to expose that lie with her individual counselor, which could be worth the effort. My wife's insurance is covering her individual counselor. I am not sure how many sessions are covered for free, but after about 5 or 6, the costs start coming out of her health savings account. You are absolutely right. This is a character issue, and very serious one at that. What troubles me even more than the affair is the constant lies, half-truths, and omissions. It seemed like a much deeper problem, possibly related to some mental issues. This undermines my faith in resolving our issues. She wonders why I completely distrust her, but at the same time, she doesn't seem to realize that her lies are the root cause of that distrust. The affair is just a symptom of her character, and those lies are absolute deal breakers for me. After listening to the recording of her session with the individual counselor, I couldn't help but notice that one of the last things she practically boasted about was her ability to quote-unquote push my buttons. Well, her days of trying to provoke me in that way are now over. I have been ignoring all her attempts to get a reaction out of me today, and it's been quite frustrating for her, to say the least. As for the whole issue of privacy, that's not even something I'm willing to compromise on. If that changes even a little, I am ready to have my lawyer file divorce papers immediately. I have already consulted with him and everything is prepared. When I do initiate this, it will be a quote-unquote for cause divorce, with her and her affair partner's quote-unquote love messages and photos presented as evidence. This way, if any of her family members are involved, they will get to see just how proud she was of her actions. It will be a soul-crushing revelation for her, especially since she's been trying to maintain the image of being pure and innocent. I am close to finalizing my decision to get a divorce. I have already gone through the necessary steps with my lawyer so we can file for divorce at any time. After all the lies and deception, I am not willing to try and fix things, even if she were to genuinely make an effort. However, I am not sure if she can move past her own sense of victimhood to see that the end is near. I guess what I'm unsure about is how long I should give her, especially to make it seem like I am making an effort. For the sake of family, I realize that 6 weeks might be too much of a time frame, but what would be a fair duration? I have started reading a book about healing from infidelity, and interestingly, she began reading it at the same time. However, she stopped reading it when it reached the more challenging parts that required the wayward spouse to take the full responsibility and put in most of the work. This is why I'm currently stuck in the uncertain state without a clear path forward other than proceeding with divorce. It's incredibly difficult to contemplate throwing away 24 years of my life, even though I don't really know who that person truly was. I am also very reluctant to lose our farm, as I have invested so much effort, sweat, and tears into this place. She had also brought her affair partner into almost every aspect of our lives, which seemed there are hardly any activities we do that aren't somewhat connected to him. This include everything from grocery shopping to mowing our fields, even her close friends, and my daily chores like feeding the livestock. These constant reminders have been causing me a lot of trouble, mainly anger and a great deal of disgust. However, one area where the individual counselor I've been talking to has been helping is managing my anger. I am not resisting these reminders, but I'm not letting them consume me as much as before, which had made life somewhat more bearable for now. In short, how long should I give her to realize the gravity of her action before I decide it's enough? Today, I asked her directly if she thought she could even come close to attempting what was outlined in the Healing Infidelity book, but she refused to answer. This led me to suspect my effort might be in vain. After she learned that I intended to file for divorce, she attempted to manipulate me by acting seductive and telling me how much she missed intimacy. However, she didn't realize that I found her as attractive as a piece of decaying flesh, and I would sooner embrace a cactus than be with her intimately. The woman I had once adored now turns my stomach, and even her scent was repulsive to me. Last night marked the first time I have slept through the entire night since the day everything came to light. It was a welcome respite, and I had almost forgotten what that felt like. However, this morning, she dropped a bombshell stating that if there is no actual intimacy, she doesn't see how she can stay in the relationship. I'm not sure if she viewed this as a form of shock therapy, but I honestly don't care. As I mentioned, I would choose a cactus over her. Later in the day, she expressed her disbelief that I could be so upset over just 4 months of her affair, considering we have 24 years together where we were happy. It's baffling to me how someone could be so detached from reality to think that either of these lines of conversation would lead to a positive outcome. I have decided to reclaim control of my life from her, and I'm no longer engaging in arguments with her. Instead, I provide short and concise responses and then put an end to the conversation. Her thinly veiled threat and her inability to see the disconnect between the past 23 and a half years of our relationship and the 4 months affair have made up my mind regarding our future. My lawyer has advised me to wait until the new year before filing for divorce, and I'm inclined to follow that advice. Thank you for staying till the end of this story. Please don't forget to hit the thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you and have